Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. I'm John Bartz with Network Consulting Services, and today we'll be discussing endpoint management and security best practices with the DOE. And with me today is our own UEM expert, Brian Hodzik. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, everybody.
And we also have two guest speakers from the DOE, James Marriott from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and Joe Beatty from National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Welcome. We're excited to have you on today's webinar. We're taking a different approach today, peeking into the DOE and interviewing James and Joe on best practices, and you'll have an opportunity to submit questions. Please keep in mind there are some questions that we won't be able to answer due to obvious security concerns. So enter your questions in the Q&A or the chat box, and we'll be monitoring those. And there's a backpack giveaway for the best question. Okay, gentlemen, let's dive right in and discuss endpoint management at the DOE laboratories.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Hodzik. I work with NCSI. Today, we're going to be talking about several different technologies from a company called Avanti. And we're going to be interviewing James and Joe and seeing how they use these various products to solve some of the challenges specific at their organizations. But let's talk about Avanti a little bit first. For those who don't know who Avanti is, it was established in 1985. It's a privately owned company. It's been around for a very long time and has a lot of brands that you may be familiar with. So I like to show this for customers that maybe don't know who Avanti is. Very likely you do recognize a lot of these other names, companies like Landesk and Front Range and Heat, etc. So these are the DNA that goes into the Avanti family. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of the technology that came from the Landesk family and some of the Shavlik technology as well. But no, as part of the DNA in the Avanti family, there was a lot of companies that were brought together to be formed as Avanti. And in that portfolio of products, they have 5 different pillars: Endpoint Security, Unified Endpoint Management, IT Asset Management, Service Management, and Identity Management. We're going to be focusing on really just the Endpoint Management, and that kind of bleeds over a little bit into some of the neighboring pillars. That's the things that I've highlighted in green here today. So those are the products that we're going to be focusing on and interactions with Joe and James. So that Unified Endpoint Management is kind of the topic of the focus today for today's conversation. But no, there's a lot of other pieces to the puzzle as it relates to the Avanti portfolio. So, please ask questions and interact with us as we go along. We want to keep this as interactive as possible. So try not to have it be a big sales pitch, but, really an interaction with an existing customer of the product. They're going to tell us a little bit more about how they use the product and challenges that they've had in the past and so forth. So please use that Q&A box. We can't hear anybody, but we can respond to those questions. So first I'd like to talk about Joe. Joe, can you tell us a little bit about NREL and what your lab does?
Sure. We do research pretty much everything renewable, from solar to wind to bio, everything. So we have about 4,300 end nodes. We're about 25% Mac and 75% Windows. I've been working here with Ivanti, or Landesk, as you'll hear us probably slip up and call it, since 2004 or 2010, and I've been working with the product since 2004.
Okay, great. Yeah, and one of my favorite parts about your lab, Joe, is in the lobby you have a really cool monitoring system that says how net positive or negative your energy consumption is. Obviously, from the picture you can see some, lots of solar panels and things like that. So I always thought that was very fascinating to see how, a facility like that could be, net neutral or even less than that energy consumption. So that was a really cool thing I like seeing at your office. So tell me, Joe, a little bit about, maybe some problems you've had with software distribution in the past. What issues have come up as it relates to pushing out software, and, maybe how has Avanti helped out with that?
Well, we're a really mobile lab. We're primarily laptops that travel quite a bit, whether it's switching between hardware and wireless. And to get a good number, we always look for the 80-20 rule, trying to get 80% as quick as possible and then work on the last 20. We've been able to utilize Avanti Agent by sending in inventories when they change their IP addresses, so that we have the latest, greatest information to contact them. We've also used it to, make sure that they're up to date on all their latest softwares. Some of the other issues we've had were just, you know, standard bugs that come out in the products, and Avanti is usually pretty quick to help us out typically to get those patched and get those fixed.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that software fulfillment. You know, does the user have to pick up the phone and call somebody every time they want a piece of software?
Not every time. For any free software or software that we have site licenses for, we utilize the portal, and we advertise it based off of whether it's a AD group to target those systems, if it is purchase software, or we just roll it out to all supported systems that can run it. So we have a wide range of all of our standard software in the portal that we make available to our end users.
Okay. So, you know, just to clarify, the portal, I like to describe it as like your own little app store.
Yeah.
You know, users are so comfortable with, you know, grabbing apps on their phone. It's a very similar kind of technology. The user just goes to it, they browse through what they want, they click on it, and it just, you know, shows up on their machine. They don't have to go through the installation process. So
It also limits the need for administrative rights because it does run under the system context.
yeah, no, great comment that, you know, again, they don't need anything on top of just being able to browse through it and click on it to be able to get that kind of stuff. So you said you have a large percentage of laptops. What does that mean from a remote perspective? Does, you know, everyone, you know, physically sit there in the building, or do you have to manage devices that exist outside the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of both, right? So they travel throughout the lab quite a bit, and that's where the, you know, inventory scan comes in when they change the subnet. But also we have a cloud services appliance on our DMZ. So when devices are off our network, they can still send in inventory as long as they have a network connection, of course. They can send in vulnerability scans. They also pull policies and schedule tests every 4 hours. So if they're off the network, they're at Starbucks, and we have a patch or something that we need to get out to them, as long as they're on the network, within 4 hours, we're going to check in for that and download the patch and install that remotely. Another big feature that we have is the remote control for Windows devices through the CSA. We utilize that when people are having issues getting connected to VPN. We actually still have access to their system as long as they have a managed agent on there.
Okay, great. So just to clarify, the cloud service appliance, it's just a hardened Linux appliance that we sit in the DMZ. I know it has that word cloud in it, but it's not really a true cloud process. It's more of just a reverse proxy that we use in the DMZ that allows our devices to be able to communicate back. And then we just program our agents. If, you know, they're on the inside, great, let's use the inside technology. But if they're just at that Starbucks, like you described, be able to recognize that, be able to tunnel their traffic for the important management functions and bring that home to the server. So.
Correct, and we actually configure our agent to be dynamic, so if it can't reach the core server directly, it will automatically switch over to gateway mode and communicate through the CSA.
Okay, great. So I know that there's a lot of challenges. You talk about the inventory and so forth. You know, having data and using data are two completely different things. Tell us a little bit about how, you know, maybe you are able to locate devices or understand what's going on with the information that is stored in there. Is there something that helps you out with that?
Yeah, so the inventory has quite a wide range of objects in there, and we use it heavily for our FSMA data calls that DOE calls down for us that we have to report back, you know, what software we have installed, what kind of hardware, how many devices, how many types of Windows 7, Windows 10, or the different Mac OS versions. So we utilize it heavily for that, but we also use the inventory to build dynamic queries. And that's one thing that I haven't found that matches from Avanti, is something that we can actually build these queries to dynamically target devices based off of certain criteria that we have to target them with, so that as they fulfill that requirement, they drop out of the query. So that's why I call it the dynamic queries, and eventually those queries will dwindle down to just a few nodes that haven't checked in for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
You feel that you have to know SQL and do reporting services and those kinds of things in order to execute those.
Right. Yeah. No, it's very much the GUI based. You know, just build your query. I actually build my queries up, the more complex ones that I don't want to write in SQL. I'll actually build them in the console, then go into the database and pull that query out and run it manually if I need to.
Okay, great. We don't have any questions for Joe yet. Just we'll interact with James here for a minute. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in that Q&A box. James, can you tell us a little bit about your lab and what you do there?
Yeah, so Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, or LLNL, as we all call it here locally, started off many years ago with a lot of research and stuff, development with nuclear weapons and that type of stuff. But we've moved away from that a lot into other types of sciences, but we still have a mission to help maintain, the arsenal out there that we have using research and stuff. But basically, we have lots of science all across the spectrum. We have supercomputers, good stuff like that. And we have roughly 7,000 employees here on site, but we have numerous computers per employee running instrument computers, stuff like that. So the security of our computers, our networks, and all that is paramount because we have a lot of data that others would just love to have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to be a huge target on your guys' back, considering the kind of research that you do and how you interact with those, those departments with nuclear technologies. So, every foreign government out there probably has you pretty high on the list of, hey, wouldn't it be nice to break into this kind of organization? And if I recall, at one point you even had like the fastest supercomputer in the world, doing different nuclear research and so forth. Anyway, James, I understand that you have an incredibly aggressive patching cycle in order to try and help mitigate that. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what the patch window is? How quickly do you need to get the patches out after they've been released by the manufacturers?
Yeah, sure. So years ago, in the 2000s and era, we weren't too aggressive on it like most companies. But, various incidences out there have kind of caused us to change our stance. And where a lot of companies now have moved to, and especially government industries, have moved to 30 days or less for patching, we've gone to pretty much 1 week or less when it comes to, especially the Microsoft updates that come out. And we get our, patch content into Landesk, as I call it, or Avanti EPM nowadays, usually late Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday night of Patch Tuesday week, I'm talking, by Wednesday night, we're, testing it out on a couple hundred systems, Thursday doing further testing, and by Friday night into Saturday, we've patched probably 90% of our systems.
Oh, wow. That's an incredibly aggressive timeline. I know in interacting with a lot of my customers, even the 30 days is a very big mountain to climb to be able to get the patches out there in, that amount of time. Tell me a little bit about, how do users interact with that? They obviously understand the security nature of the data that they're dealing with, but, what kind of pushback or what do your users say about this aggressive nature of patching?
So, yeah, it's funny because years ago, we had the IT departments were, very federated there. And some groups could reboot users' computers with a certain amount of notice. Others could not. We'd have to tell our user to reboot to now where, we give them X number of hours to reboot after that. So initially there's a lot of pushback, people complaining to managers and stuff. And we have basically 6 or 7 business units with all having their own management levels. And there was a lot of pushback, and now people understand now in today's world of ransomware and all this stuff that security is paramount, and the stuff that we have is worth protecting. We have multiple networks, some that will never see the light of day, and those systems may be on a different cycle. Our servers a little on if they're facing the outside, they're very strict on patching. If they're internal, a little bit more leeway, but we patch, and like crazy, and like I said, what we do is, Friday night, 5 o'clock, we set our patches to autofix for our required patches, and that's pretty much anything security related rated by Microsoft or others, Mozilla, Firefox, all those types of things. We're aggressive. We patch more items that are available to us and that we don't patch, and users come in and we tell them, hey, when you leave for the day on Friday, log out of your computer, when you come back Monday, you'll be patched, good to go, no interruptions. And if they don't log out, they know that they're going to come into a reboot prompt and have very short window of time before that system reboots. So they're used to it now, but we're also trying to become more user-friendly and enable our users. And so we have a homegrown tool that lives in their little task tray that they can open up at any time, see their patching status based on a color, and it'll tell them, like you need 5 patches. And they can click a button there to remediate, and it basically then calls the, Avanti EPM scanner to do a repair. But it allows them to control things at their convenience if they miss a window.
Okay. No, I really like that. The attitude of, we're in charge and we do whatever we want, that really needs to go by the wayside. The interacting with the users in a friendlier, nicer manner, getting them to buy into the concept that this is important that we're patching, that's oftentimes a political problem that needs to come from the top down, the CIO or someone like that, mandating this is why we're doing it, this is important for the security, getting them logical buy-off into the process. But, I love that idea of interacting with the user and giving them a little bit more leeway, giving them a little bit more options, telling them, hey, if it's going to happen this automatic way or you can do it that manual way, you get to decide which one it happens.
Right. One thing I'm, pushing Avanti as a company for is to allow users to have a window they can set. Like I want it, to be patched on, say, Tuesday night at this time or whatever. So that's, a feature request I have in, and I've been pushing them. And I have to say, Avanti as a company listens to their customers and is pretty responsive. That's kind of a big change there that I'm asking for, so I don't expect it overnight.
Sure. What do you think that would look like, where the user individually sets a maintenance window on a one-time basis? They set it for, I'm thinking like my Outlook calendar where they set it for the month upcoming, or what would you envision that looking like?
Preferably, I like for them to say what night of the week or what time frame works best for you, because, right now we're patching monthly in general, but we're moving to, like last week we had Firefox 0-day exploits. So, we're pushing those out of band. So I would like to have, say, to the user, say, give me one night a week that, if need be, is the best night for me to patch you. We're not going to do it obviously every week if we don't need to, but some of these patches nowadays, you've got to go out of band. You can't rely on your 30-day window or monthly cycle. Flash Player, Java, those are the big guys, and that's a big plus also for the Avanti EPM product is you've got all the third-party patch content in there. Or if you go with a Microsoft product or some others, you've got to pay additional funds to have, Firefox, Java, and all these other things. And, that's one of the strengths that brought us to Landesk at the time is, give me everything here, one console. I don't have to go out and purchase these other plugins. And kind of nice. But like I said, it's 30. I read something recently that I think it's Department of Homeland Security, which sets a lot of government standards for what we're going to do for in our industry, is moving or has moved. I can't remember which one, from a 30-day window for criticals and stuff such to a 15-day window. Now on our site we're ahead of that, but not everyone is, and it's getting tough. It's a moving target, and the bad guys have gotten a lot more sophisticated.
Yeah, and that plays well really into a great question we have here, talking about the DHS Binding Operational Directive 1901. I think this is what you're referencing. The comment is that critical vulnerabilities need to be remediated within 15 days, and high vulnerabilities need to be remediated within 30 days. So, it sounds like that is kind of the new benchmark that's being set out there in terms of a rapid response. And, that makes sense from a criticality perspective. Oftentimes, remotely exploitable, highly susceptible machines fall into that critical range, whereas maybe a high is just not as sensitive and not going to be as easily remotely exploitable, for example. So having the speed on that is important.
Right.
So I have another question here. can you elaborate a little bit on your patching process and the segmentation of that? Desktops versus servers versus business systems. What kind of regression testing you have as part of that process?
So we categorize our typical user, our various administrators and non-critical use systems, basically, as centrally managed. That's what we call them. So those systems are the ones that we're really, really aggressive with. And I would say 85–90% of our computers live on that core. Then we have a couple other cores that handle servers for our data center. There's different folks have different thoughts on having, the Landesk client or EPM client on servers. Avanti has the Shablik process or patching solution that's been, used heavily in various data centers, around the country. But we've always used Landesk / EPM for that and have not had any problems. And those, like I mentioned earlier, we give those a little more leeway if they're not outward facing, if they're behind all of our firewalls and defense and depth. I can say that about, our site. It's very, very, very hard, to get into our facility. And I mean, we've got multiple products being used. I won't name names, but are being used for, network scanning, vulnerability assessment. And actually, that's a good thing. One of our vulnerability assessment scanners, it goes out and detects some things. And those guys, our cybersecurity guys, will come to me and say, hey, how come Avanti is not catching this Java EXE or whatever? And a lot of times digging into it, it's just a copy of Java EXE, or someone's made a copy of their old hard drive and stuff. And it's like, well, it's not installed, so I can't really patch it. Well, we work closely with our cybersecurity folks who, like I said, use a lot of other tools to double check our security level. And then as far as systems, we have networks, like I mentioned, that won't see the light of day, but yet they still have a very strict patching timeline, where it used to be never to now it's well within the DHS guidelines, and probably well within the new one there, the 1901. Those systems are patched, and they're air gapped, but still, security is paramount here, and we've got to do what we have to do.
What about you, Joe? From a aggressiveness of patching, I know it may not be as aggressive as Gene's, but what kind of challenges or timelines do you have over at NREL?
So for patching our Windows patches, we use actually WSS,
Sure.
and we do the third Friday. So we give users about a week to install their own, and then Friday morning, I believe at 2 a.m. or at some point, we automatically push those out to any system that's available, and then any systems that come on the network get that patch immediately and then reboot. We do, of course, like James said, have out-of-band patching when there's critical vulnerabilities, whether it's a Windows or a third party. But what we use Avanti for is third-party patching heavily. We have a pretty big directive coming down that we need to make sure that a large group of software is always up to date. So we actually implemented Rollout Projects to help us out with that. What that does is it pretty much sets a template that will go through the steps. First once new content's available through patch management, it will send an email out to our admins. Then it will install on our test systems, our predefined test systems. Once that's complete, then another email will go out and say, hey, go check these systems out, make sure that everything's good. And you can click the button, and then we go to what we consider IT pilot. So we hit all of our IT systems, and we let that sit for 24, 48 hours, and then we patch third party. So with third party, we're kind of in that realm with James there. Within a week, we're probably targeting autofix on all of those products, and some of the big ones, all the Adobe with Reader, Flash, Acrobat, Air, Chrome, Firefox, FileZilla, Notepad++, just all these random software installations that our scientists utilize on a day-to-day basis to get their job done.
Okay, great. So I appreciate you guys kind of interacting from a patch perspective and tell us a little bit more about your specific use cases. I would like to jump in here and talk about a brand new product from the Avanti portfolio that most people haven't seen yet. If you've seen presentations about Avanti before, this one may be a brand new one. And then if anyone else has questions about it or about other things, again, feel free to put them in the chat window there. So Avanti Cloud is in my opinion, poorly named because it's just very generic, but it is an actual product called Avanti Cloud that, Avanti sees as the future of all of these products that you saw in that DNA slide and all of the different technology from those 5 different pillars. So being able to take all of that data from not only the Endpoint Manager that you've heard Joe and James talk about a lot, but same with SCCM and Active Directory and all of these different data sources that we have, normalize that data, create reconciliation logic associated with it to eliminate duplication, things like that, and then spit that out into actual actionable items so that we can consume that information without having to bring a huge amount of knowledge to the table with our smart advisors. And that includes real-time intelligence. This is something that we've really struggled with in the past. There's a lot of times that if someone says, hey, what's going on in the network right now? Where are these devices? A lot of attributes we have to say, well, it had this software as of 3 days ago. Well, maybe that's not good enough. Maybe I need to have a much more rapid understanding of, what the devices are right now and what their state is. So that's kind of what Avanti Cloud does. I want to show you a little bit about how that works. Just, a quick couple of minutes of demonstrated some of the cool functions inside of the Avanti Cloud. So here I'm logged into my cloud tenant. I can click on the devices and kind of review all the individual devices that I have if I want to, just search for one or look at something in particular. But a lot better way to kind of understand what's going on is to use the real-time intelligence. Real-time intelligence gives us the ability to use a natural language search engine, kind of like Google. You don't have to think really hard when you go to Google and search for something. It brings a lot to the table. And be able to get that instant information. So I could just type in map right here. If I say map, it knows what I meant. It knows I wanted to look at where the devices were placed on a map. And if you look down here in the bottom, it says that 7 of 7 devices responded. Now, it was really quick, so you may have not seen it, but it'll actually count up on those devices as it renders the map in this case. And so what that means is I asked for this information right now, not an hour ago, not, sometime today, but, they responded within, milliseconds or seconds to bring me back this information. This agent was, kind of written from the ground up with IoT in mind. So it uses an IoT protocol called MQTT that works in low bandwidth, doesn't, cause a huge amount of weight on the network. So you can query thousands of devices without having to, saturate the network like we did in days past. So, now it's really cool. I can kind of go and zoom in and see where my devices are located and, what's going on with those devices. And I can even kind of narrow it down with this little tool right here. Say, okay, I want to see all the devices here in this block of area. This is going to show me my individual devices. I can click on it right here and go into the more specific details associated with the machine, know the real-time CPU, the real-time memory associated with it, and dig more into the particular details of a particular machine. But other things we have in here, what if you just want to know the security dashboard? That's going to go, let's turn off our filter up there at the top so it shows all the devices again. But it's going to tell me things like security health and what's the status of user access control, what's the BitLocker status on these machines, what's the antivirus and the firewall. What's great about it is I can look at the individual details on what the status of BitLocker is, and I can even create customizable actions. So this would send an action out to that device to enable BitLocker in this particular case. Or if I wanted to have, the same kind of thing with user account control, and I wanted to enable UAC and then reboot those devices. So not only can I investigate the devices, I can also have actionable events associated with that. We can do some cool trending information. So I've trended the logon times for a particular user, me in this example, where for the last month or so, I've been watching how long it takes to log into my machine. And so I can understand maybe where some problems are happening. Hey, that was a particularly large logon time that, on 520, it took 27 seconds to log in. Maybe there's something wrong. I can troubleshoot based on, large login times based on a certain geographic range or something like that. So we can trend that information over time. It doesn't just have to be, real time right here, right now. Again, anything you want to type in here, we give you some good, recommendations and some pointers in the right direction, but that natural language search up here is really cool. One time I went in here, like the very first time that I went and searched for map, it said, well, I don't know what you mean. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. I guess it doesn't know what the map is. And then I came back 2 days later and logged in. It says, hey, you asked me this a little while ago. I didn't know what it was then, but I know what it is now. So now you can search for maps. So, between machine learning and some other technologies like that, being able to improve the process over time to be smarter than it was yesterday, which, that's one of the great reasons that we do things, in the cloud. So a couple of other things. We have these really cool smart advisors. Oftentimes you have to come to the table knowing what to look for. This we can, bring the data to the table for you. So for example, Reimage or replace. We have the ability to track down information like warranty information, and then cross-reference that against what operating system and where that operating system is in its build lifecycle. So, what is the Windows OS version? What is the device warranty? What is the Windows lifecycle of that Windows OS version? So down here at the bottom, it can say, I should reimage this machine. I should reimage it because, the warranty is probably still in place, but the operating system is not going to be supported anymore. And, if we keep going here, we'd eventually get to some that are going to say replace because it's been out of warranty. And if it's out of warranty and the operating system is out of place, there's really no reason that we should be, hanging on to that. So Smart Advisors also has this cool reconciliation. I know a lot of customers tell me that this is an incredibly difficult thing to do. We have the ability to plug into different systems like Active Directory. We have the ability to plug into Endpoint Manager. We can plug into SCCM. We can plug into ThirdParty CSVs, lots of different plugins that we have, and then we can reconcile between them. So I can say like this, show me devices that are inside of Active Directory, but show me devices that are also not inside of Endpoint Manager. So down here in the bottom, it tells me devices that are inside Active Directory, but not inside of my Endpoint Manager tool. So this gives us the ability to reconcile between two different disparate sources. And since we gather a lot more than just the device name, we can have that reconciliation engine understand duplicates better than just a simple listing of what the device name is. So that's our Avanti Cloud. It's like I said, a brand new product, very cool kind of add-on on top of any other product that you own out there, and gives you the ability to have that real time and that intelligence associated with the smart advisors. I talked about a little bit earlier about the pillars that you'll sometimes hear us call inside the Avanti portfolio. This is kind of them with a little bit more about the product details, our application control, our asset management, our service management, identity and access control. So these are all the different pieces of the puzzle. We don't have time to get into all of them today. But if you are interested, you can hit me up. I'd be happy to tell you more about these. But we have some cool licensing options that, down at the bottom, they have an option where you can license 2 of the pillars and get all the products that exist in that stack, or there's even a way to, in something called the Unified IT, that it just unlocks all of the products inside of the portfolio for you. So, if you're an Avanti customer already and you're looking to expand, now may be the time to talk about the enterprise license agreement to see if, from a cost perspective, it's not that much to jump up higher, but you get, a bunch of additional functionality. All right, so let's go through some of the questions that have come across while we were talking here. I have a question here that says, how is Avanti on Mac and Linux systems? So the answer to that is it depends on the product itself. You heard James mention earlier something called Shavlik. Now, Shavlik was a company, if we go way back to the DNA slide, you'll see that it was acquired by Avanti several years ago. It was a focused patching technology that had its roots back at Microsoft from a gentleman named Mark Shavlik. And it really is the industry standard when it comes to patching. And so when Avanti bought them, they actually took the engine and the database and actually put it inside of both the Endpoint Manager product and what they renamed the legacy Shavlik product. It was called Patch for Windows. Now they're renaming it to a product called Avanti Security Controls. And that engine and database lives in there. So, sorry, long roundabout way of saying it depends on the product. If we're looking at Endpoint Manager patch or patch for Windows or ISEC, and on Endpoint Manager, it supports PC and Mac. You just right out of the box. Mac machines aren't really any much different than our regular PC machines. On the security control side, it was previously named Patch for Windows. You know, a big surprise, it just supported Windows. But that's why they renamed it to Avanti Security Controls, because they recently added Linux support, and they are going to soon add Mac support. So depending on which tool you go into, we have varying levels of support. But, you know, amongst all of the tools, we have PC, Mac, and Linux patching as part of the process. Okay, I have another question here that asks about the Avanti Cloud. Do I need to own another Avanti product to get Avanti Cloud? So you don't have to own an existing product today. You could own nothing from Avanti, and you could go just directly and buy Avanti Cloud if you wanted to. We do have some connectors to existing Avanti products if you want to leverage them, but you're not required to go and have something on-premise already to be able to do that. And from a licensing perspective, you also have the ability to unlock the cloud as part of that enterprise license agreement we talked about. So if you get the ELA, the Unified IT ELA, it includes the Avanti Cloud as well. Okay, I have one more question here. Can I see the device statuses compared to an authorized configuration? So that's part of you know, what I would probably categorize as configuration management. Show me the delta between the way it should be configured and the way that it is configured. We have some of that inside of the Endpoint Manager technology, the ability to not only just look at configurations, but look at poorly set ones. You know, does the machine automatically log into the computer? Does it have more than one or two users in the administrative group? You know, is the firewall enabled? Those kinds of relatively pre-canned configurations. As part of our security suite, we have those kinds of detections in there. So if you want to just use kind of the out-of-the-box versions, that you could do that. There's a couple of other ways you could skin that cat. You could create custom definitions to scan for it. You know, if you said, hey, I wrote this PowerShell script and it spits out all the settings that are incorrect or correct, you could create a custom definition and alert based on that, or you could create an individual custom definition to say, hey, go look at this registry key, and if this registry key is set to 1, then, you know, the following setting is misapplied, and we need to, you know, have a repair to actually go and set that back. So that's kind of one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is looking into the Environment Manager product. This is a product that came over from our AppSense family, and it gives us the ability to set those configurations as part of a process. So, you know, gone are the days of login scripts and, you know, individually setting group policy objects. We can actually, you know, as part of a process, GUI driven, I've logged into the machine, I want to be able to go and, you know, set this registry setting, or they execute this process. I want to look to see if this service is running, or they've disconnected from the network. Let's check the service again. You know, so lots of different places that we can evaluate conditions and then potentially apply actions if we don't like what those conditions are. So that's another way to do the configuration management in the Environment Manager policy configuration. Okay, let me open it back up to Joe and James. Any questions about anything else we've reviewed or anything like that?
I'll throw one out there. As far as the Avanti Cloud, it's probably $1 million question for most labs. Is it FedRAMP certified? And if not, what's the? Are you planning on doing it? And if so, or is Avanti planning on doing it? If so, what the progress is on that?
Sure. No, that's a fabulous question. So at Avanti's Interchange, their global user conference, I met with Tom Davis, the CTO of Avanti, and I posed that exact same question. I said, I can't go in good conscience and sell this to federal customers if it's not FedRAMP certified. And he says that's absolutely top of the list from a priority perspective. It is not today. It has to do with the libraries that they use. It's more than just going and get a rubber stamp on, the products that they wrote. But if they reference libraries, those libraries need to be FedRAMP certified as well. So that's going through the process. He knows that it is a huge thing that they need to try and achieve, and is very, very high on the radar. So he didn't give official time frame for it. Avanti never wants to let customers down and promise it by X, and then for whatever reason not able to deliver it by X. So he just said it's absolutely not forgotten, and they're working on it ASAP.
So this is James. Yeah, that's a big thing for us as well. And for those listening, you can use a lot of the products like the Endpoint Manager and stuff now. That stuff's all on-prem, so it's fine. But it's a lot of this new technology coming out in the cloud that we want to utilize, and Microsoft has a lot of stuff that we want to utilize as well for other processes, and we're in the same boat with them. It's not just Avanti and stuff. I've got a question. What can you tell me about the 2019 version coming up from Avanti EPM?
Yeah, so Endpoint Manager 2019 is slated to be released this month. As a matter of fact, I'm a little surprised we don't have our hands on it already, but any day now we should have access to it. It was delayed a little bit due to a vulnerability that was found in a previous version, so they want to make sure that was corrected. So Endpoint Manager 2019.1 should be coming out any day now. I really encourage my customers to not have to feel like they did in years past where they said, hey, I'm going to wait a year before I upgrade, things like that. With that rapid release cycle that most organizations are going to, by the time you get your hands on it, they've already gone out and done several deployments. What they do is they call up a customer and ask if they can come on site. They actually do this to a couple of different customers, and they install it in production, not in some test over the side. They put it in production, and they bring a whole gaggle of developers and lock them in a room. And they discover bugs, they find the bugs, they walk over to the developers, they fix the bugs, and so they can very, very quickly turn that around. So by the time that release actually hits the street, it's already in production at many different customers out there. So I always tell our customers that it's not that big of a deal. Back in the day, we said, "Oh, I'm waiting for the first service pack." I don't think we necessarily have to have that same kind of mentality associated with it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's really impressed me with Avanti's products is, you can call them with your problems, email them, however you want to get a hold of them. And, they listen, and instead of, what some other vendors tell you, oh, it's an issue and, next year it might be fixed. I've gone around and around with some major vendors on stuff like that. And Avanti's really good with it, and I don't have to always call Avanti and say, hey, let me talk to a high-level guy. I can call one of you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, James. All right, so one other question, clarification, talking about the difference between FedRAMP and FIPS. So the FIPS certification is there. There's several different settings inside of Endpoint Manager that reference FIPS and being able to turn that on. So from a FIPS perspective, that's already taken care of for all of the on-premise, but the FedRAMP is different for cloud-hosted systems. So the Avanti Cloud would almost certainly need to fall under FIPS, but on top of that, the FedRAMP certification. So that process is ongoing, and if anyone has liked what they saw and really wants to be part of it but needs to wait for FedRAMP, just hit me up and I'll be happy to keep you in the loop as soon as that certification comes around. All right, so I think we've taken care of all the questions. I'd like to say thank you to Joe and James. I really appreciate you jumping on and giving us a little bit of insight into the endpoint management and security associated with your various organizations. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and thank you everyone who attended. If we didn't quite answer your question or anything like that, here's my contact information. Feel free to email me. Otherwise, I appreciate everyone attending, and have a great day.